Hello everyone, Mr. Garino here, taking you on to the next step of our shooter game. Right now it's pretty functional. It plays, we click on things, click on our monsters, and if we click enough we win, if we click not enough we lose. But one thing I'd like to incorporate into the game is, to play this game we have to load up the Flash player and hit Control Enter, and of course then it plays. If we take our Swift file, so let's do that one time. If we press Control Enter, it plays, and I'm just going to lose real quick. Okay, but if I go to the folder where I'm doing all of my testing, and I have this Mr. G Shooter Game A, which I think is okay, just the name that I'm working with, so that is correct. It makes an output file. So this is with the red icon. This is the file name to open in Adobe Flash Professional. So this file .fla opens in Flash Professional where it says Flash Document. This one with the white icon with the little red F, script F, is called a SWF file, SWF, and it's a movie file. Everything in Flash they call a movie. So this one opens in the Flash player, or in the newer versions of Flash it opens right in a browser. So you don't need Flash Professional to run this file. All you need to do is double click on it and the game plays. So again, I'll lose, and you can see it actually says you lose. Okay, so the game plays fine just by double clicking on this. So on a website I could put this as a little picture or text with a link that when you click on it goes to this file and it just plays. And every time you click on that link the game would just play. But everyone's fairly familiar with these silly games you play on websites. Usually when you click on the link it comes to some screen and it just sits there, and before you play the game you click on something like a start button. So that's what I'd like to do now, is show you how to incorporate a start button. So the first thing we're going to do is make a layer above our energy layer, but below our actions layer, and guess what we're going to call it? We're going to call it button. You can call it anything you want. You don't even have to really change the name actually, but I wanted to. Now, when the game first starts, and again, and everything flashes, and everything in Flash is a movie, so it wants to start playing a movie from frame 1. So on frame 1 we don't want to start doing our code. We want to that plays the game. We want to have some code that makes a button run. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this code that's here on the first frame of the actions layer be on the second frame of the actions layer. So all I'm going to do is right click on there and say copy frames, and then go to frame 2, right click and say paste frames. Now I have the same exact code on 2 frames. Of course I don't want it on 2 frames. So on this frame, the first frame, I'm going to right click excuse me, and I'm going to go to clear frames. So now it's if I click away from it, it's a totally empty frame. There's no code on it, there's no picture or anything on it, because all the graphics are on other layers, which you can see by me turning them all off. There's nothing there. Okay, but my code, let me put my layers back on. If I click on the second frame and press F9, which of course I can't do because it pauses my recording software, so I'm going to go the long way. Here's all the code that we've put in so far. So now I also want a frame over here for my button. So to get an extra frame there, and also have an extra frame here and here on each layer, because you want all your layers to end at the same frame. So on this layer over here, I'm going to press F6 to give me a new frame with a new keyframe. And on this layer, energy, I'm just going to press F5 just to extend the timeline. And on this frame, I'm going to press F5 as well just to extend the timeline. So right now we have basically the background is there for both frames, the energy is there for both frames, and the button is not going to be there for both frames, because after we click the button it goes to play the game. We don't want the button there anymore. So that's why I made this a blank keyframe, because I want that to be blank. But on this frame right here, we're going to need a button. So the first thing we need is a symbol, a button symbol, on which we could put some ActionScript code. So to insert a button here, you could just put like a little text field and convert it to a button, and then when you click on it, it would do whatever ActionScript code you say. But rather than do that, built into Flash, there's these libraries, common libraries called buttons. So if you go again, if you didn't see what I just did, Window, Common Libraries, Buttons. So I turned on that buttons window, or panel, I should say, and here's all the different buttons. So you can find one you like. If you click on it over here, you'll see what it looks like. Here's an oval button, different types of buttons. Okay, this right here is like the graphic of what it looks like, but the ones with the actual button symbol have the text on them. And you can scroll down. I kind of like these rounded double ones. So if I go here and choose rounded double, you can see it's got quite a few, and they're just different color schemes. And maybe I like that one. Okay, so that's the one I want. So what I'm going to do is up here say insert, new symbol, and I'm going to call it BTN underscore, because that's the convention that a lot of people use when making Flash games, is to put the BTN because they know that that object in their library is a button. So BTN as in button, and then start. And notice over here, I did this before testing it. My type right now says button. So this is the type of symbol I'm creating. Yours will most likely be on Movie Clip because that's what we've done almost exclusively in Flash. So you need to switch that to button. So it makes it a button type symbol. And then say OK. So now we have a blank symbol. There's nothing there. I'm going to click on this tube double blue and drag it onto the screen. Trying to put the mouse pointer right in the center. I don't think it's very critical for that. And I might want it just a little bigger than that, so I'm going to close this panel just to get it out of the way. And I had previously docked it up here, so I have it there twice. I'm going to move it off and close it, because I know sometimes people watching the videos, when their screen doesn't look exactly like mine, they get all sort of bothered. So let me just move that off of there. But if I was going to use it a lot, I kind of docked it up here so that it would always be there. I wouldn't have to turn it on and off. Now that I have the button here, I'm going to go to my, and something else that disappeared, I just realized, my toolbar. So I'm just going to go to Essentials, Reset Essentials to get my toolbar back. And I'm going to go to my Free Transform tool. If I can get the stupid double arrow with my mouse being jumpy over here, there we go. Stretch that out a little bit. Now I don't want the text to say enter, I want it to say start. So to get inside this symbol, while it's selected with my select tool, if I click here and double click, it opens up and it says, okay, here's the symbol. Now this is a button in Flash that would be often used on like a website to let's say go to a different web page. So it's got a few different states. Quick explanation, here's what it looks like when you're when you're not touching it. Here's what it's supposed to look like when your mouse is over it. Here's what it looks like when you click on it. And this over here is just a hit area, meaning anywhere anytime your mouse is on this area, those different up, over, and down states happen. So if you're out here, it doesn't happen. So that's just like the area of the button, which kind of matches the shape that's there right now, and as well it should, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to go back over to the up state, and on this one, the one that I chose, the text layer, as you can see obviously right here, it's not locked, but I've used other buttons in Flash where when you open it up, the text layer is locked, so you can't change it. So if it comes in locked, make sure you uncheck the lock and then go to your text tool and just click over here, and instead of enter, you can say start. Obviously you can say whatever you want, it's just a word. Don't hit enter because it gives you another line. If you click over here, it wants to do more text. So what I normally do is just click back on the move tool and it accepts it. And go back to the button. And then we can go back to scene 1. So now here's our background, our main timeline for our movie. We want to insert the button onto the button layer on the first keyframe. So we're going to go back to the library, and you'll see right here it says button start. So I'm going to click on that, hold it down, again one more time, while the button layer is selected and we're at the first frame, we're going to click here and drag and put this somewhere wherever we like. Okay, so now we have a button there called start, and we want to put some action script code on it. So on the first frame here, we're going to press F9, but of course I can't do that, so I'm going to go the long way. And this is what we're going to type in. And let me make this bigger for you. I guess when I did that reset essentials, it put this back to the standard way. So the first thing we're going to do, when you start this game, but of course in Flash they call it a movie, so whenever anything starts in Flash, it wants to go to the first frame of the main timeline and start playing it like it's a movie. So it goes to this first frame, and what's it see? Well, it's got an energy thing. Let me click away. It's got the energy stuff. It's got the background, the whole background, and it's got a start button. So with no action script code or anything, it's going to go to this frame, and then within a split second later, it's going to go to the next frame. And in Flash, everything just replays, so it's just going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because it thinks it's a movie. Okay, so what we want to do is on that first frame, the button, we want to put some actions to make it do what we want. So on the button, the very first thing we want to do is we want to stop. We don't want it to play any movie. It's not a movie, it's a game. So the first thing we do is say stop. The next thing we do is we're going to give our start button a name, or our button a name. We're going to call it start button. So we're going to say start button dot add event listener. And what type of event is it? It's going to be a mouse event. And what are we listening for? We're listening for a click. And when we sense that click, what are we going to do? We're going to run some function, and I'm just going to call it, and these are things you get to choose. So I'm going to call it click start. So any name will do, as long as it's not a reserved keyword in Flash, like don't use the word stage as the name of your button, obviously. And then on the next line, we'll tell it what our function is and what it does. So function, it better be click start, because that's what we put. Now the word click would be bad to use because that's a keyword in Flash, but click start is okay because that's not a keyword. So our function, it receives an event, and what type of event? A mouse event. And then we give it our curly braces, and what do we want it to do? I want it to go to, and stop. And rather than saying on a frame, you can actually label frames and give them names. So we're in a minute we're going to label a frame, and guess what we're going to call it? We're going to call it play. Well, this is a nice way to keep track of things. So it's going to go to the frame we call play, and then do whatever it says over there. Okay, now mine imported this Flash events mouse event. It's really not necessary, so I'm going to delete that. So your code should look like this: stop, and then some name, the name of the button, which we're going to assign in a second. So I'm choosing start button, so it's add event listener, mouse event click, run the function called click start. Here's the function click start. It receives an event that's a mouse event, and all it does in that function is say go to and stop play, meaning don't play the movie, go to and stop at the area called play, or the label called play. So now we have to define those couple of things. First of all, this label right here, when I click on the very first frame of the actions layer, if I go to properties, you see where it says label, name, there's nothing there. This I'm going to call intro, because later in our game we're going to use that, go back to the start screen if we want to replay our game. So we're going to go back to intro, but that's later on. But this next frame, the frame where all of our action script code is, well, that's where the game gets played. So the label for that is going to be called play. So in our code where we said go to and stop at the label play, well, we're talking about this frame right here. And notice over here, there's like this little flag. You can't really see it on the second frame because it's got that A there, but on the first frame it doesn't have an A, so you can see the little flag, and that just stands for it's been labeled. And then the last thing we have to do is, on this button right here that we put in, we did put the ActionScript code, but this button does not have an instance name just yet. So if I click on it once, you'll see up here instance name, and that's where we named it in our code. We chose the name start button, so over here we better put start button. So it's an instance name is start, and use the same case, all lowercase except the B, as in camel case. So now we have this button named start button, and in our code on the very first frame we have start button, so we're adding an event listener to that start button, and as I explained all before. So now this should work. Actually, it's going to have a little error, but we'll fix it in a second. Let me just show you first. So let me do file save as, or file save. Let me do save as. Obviously I mess around with this a lot so I can get ready to make the video, so I'm just going to put a B on the end here. And you guys use whatever name it says on the website through the instructions. I don't even know what I'm going to call it yet. So for right now, it's Mr. G Shooter Game 8B as my trial. So let's do Control Enter and see what happens. So if you notice, the energy bar is going up and down, up and down, up and down, and that's because it's going from frame 1 to 2 and it's playing the energy. So right now if I click start, you'll see it stops moving, and then we can play the game. So I missed one, shoot on one, I'll mix the next two so I lose. Okay, so that works. So the one thing we want to do is when it starts the game and it goes to frame 1, we don't want it to show the energy right here, having the energy on the first frame. Inside that energy movie clip, there's like a little animation, meaning if we go over here to our energy thing, the little animation's playing because we have that on the first frame. So when it goes to the first frame, it says, oh, this is an embedded symbol and it does this. So it keeps going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, so we don't want that. So how do we prevent that? Well, it's pretty simple. If we just click right here, we don't really need to see the energy on the first frame or on the start screen. So we'll just right click on the very first frame of the energy layer and say clear frame. So now it's an empty frame. So now the first frame when it starts looks like this. There's no embedded little symbol that has a built-in animation. So now let me just resave this. And again, it's always good to save before you go to play, because if you messed up some code really bad, your game could crash. So now let's play it again. So this time you have no energy bouncing back and forth. When I click start, then it'll go and you'll see the energy bar and the game will start. Okay, so just lose once again just to show you that it's working. Okay, and then you lose. Notice how when I start the game, I have a mouse. When I put my mouse over, I get the little hand. And you can see when I go over the button how it changes, because that little shadow that's on the right kind of goes away, kind of lightens up. It's just like a button on a website. When you hover over it, it kind of changes. Now because the game starts when I click on it, you don't really get to see the down state, because it's very subtle. Whatever it changes to the down state, usually there's like a little shadow or something, but well, I guess you can see it there right before the game starts. Let's do that again, but it's quick. Okay, so here I put my mouse over, and then when I click, you'll see it gets a little dark over here. If I hold it down, I guess you can see it until I let go. There it goes. Right, and then the game starts. Notice now the mouse disappears and we have just a cursor. And once we lose the game, we kind of have a mouse again. I have a little I-beam, so when it's in there, so we can fix that later on. And in the next video that we have, we're going to actually add a button to replay the game. So right now we have a button to start the game. You can win, you can lose, but to replay the game, you have to close this out and do Control Enter to start it up again. But for right now, I think that's far enough to go in one video to add the start button. So you guys are going to add a start button. Don't forget the two labels. The code for the game goes in the second frame. The code for the button goes in the first frame. work it. There's many ways to do this. This is just the way I chose. And as you can see, it works, and I guess it kind of works nicely. So if you guys could accomplish that, that would be great. Thank you very much.